mean, obviously that's a question I'm sure you ask them when they first come to you, like, hey, why do you want to exit in the first place? They're like
Right.
a top three that you usually hear.
Yeah, I would say most common and most straightforward is someone's nearing retirement. That might be in 2 years, it might be in 5 years, but they're just getting to a stage where they say, hey, I'm not too far off from retirement and need to start working on my succession plan. The next, I would say, might be a smaller group, but a group we tend to work with a lot, where they've had a lot of success. They've grown the value of their business, and they might be talking to you saying, hey, I'm only 50. I'm not ready to hang this up, or, whatever their age is. But when I sit down and look at my personal assets, 90% of my personal assets are in this business. And while they've grown it and it's been very successful, they're just starting to get to a point where diversification can make sense. That might also align with they've got a lot of growth opportunity, but it makes sense to at least look at, do I diversify a little bit and be more aggressive with growth, but I'm being aggressive with a smaller percentage of my assets. And so it really is an asset allocation and just making sure the family's taken care of, but now I can, do some acquisitions. I can, do some things that are a little bit more aggressive that maybe I don't want to take all that risk on myself.
Yeah. So they're taking some chips off the table, so to speak. They've built this thing
100%.
to, 10, 15, $20 million. Let's take, 7 or 8 million or whatever it would be. And then, bring in someone that has a better skill set to take it to another level.
Exactly.
Above that. So yeah, I've seen
exactly.
that.
And then some variations of that, where owners have opportunity to grow, whether it's acquisitions, whether it's de novos, but just don't have the capital or the team. And rather than build out, their team, they say, hey, it's time to bring on a partner, so that we can, to some extent, grow smarter. Maybe it might be capital, it might be, support services, but different variations of that. But I would say those are the two most common. Is, one is nearing retirement, 2, taking some chips off the table, and then 3, and sometimes those overlap, is the support services that a partner can bring. Owners will call and say, hey, it's harder every year to negotiate rates, and being part of a bigger network, where I've got a team that negotiates rates, I got a team that negotiates leases. I'm wearing 12 hats, and I'm not a specialist in any of them. And what I really want to do is focus on, get back to, take care of the team, focus on the operations, and not, do 12 different jobs, in any given day.
Yeah. So, and I guess that would equate to burnout to some degree. People just get burnt out and they're just like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Burnout, I would classify as a fourth call. And, and those are probably the hardest ones. I shouldn't leave that out. But we will get calls from an owner who just says, hey, I'm burnt out, the practice isn't running great, I'm fatigued. Those are tough because, as there's not a lot of people out there saying, hey, hey, Steve, how many burnt out owners do you want to have that are willing to sell for cheap? Because that's kind of the way that goes, is you don't have a lot of buyers. If an owner waits until they're burnt out and they're really kind of, ready to exit, and that can also be with retirement. If someone calls and says, hey, I'm retiring in 6 months, I just turned 65 and a half. I'm filling out my Medicare apps and whatnot. And, I'm going to retire in 6 months. Can you sell this thing? And they haven't trained up their team. Their financials maybe aren't where they want them to be. For a buyer, that's significant risk because, that owner's built it up. And so burnout's a bit of a, tricky situation. I would advise owners not to get to that point and then, decide that, hey, now that I'm burnt out, I'm going to sell, because that's a tough proposition.
Yeah, if they get to that point, they're burnt out for a reason, right? So likely all those problems that are affecting them to cause the burnout are going to be reflected in the practice, and that's not probably good for the value of the practice at that point. So
Exactly.
we've tried to have conversations with owners to say, I just have a motto: never sell when you're burnt out, because unless it's a something that you just can't help, but the practice is not in a good condition. Maybe work with a consultant, work on 4 or 5 key areas, try to get it into a position where, it's a little bit more attractive. And, we've had in some other industries, I've had some success with that, where somebody waited a year and a half and they got, an extra million or $1.5 million because they did that. So theme here is never sell, make a decision when you are burnt out, because it tends to be a pretty bad decision that you make when you're in that kind of mental, state.
Yeah, that's a great point. And obviously we've worked with some mutual owners over the years, and and that's part of why we have a consulting team that works with owners. Sometimes it's just building value and helping them accelerate growth. Sometimes it's an owner that is a little burnt out and they need some fresh help with training that clinic director team, with kind of re-inspiring the team and getting things back on track. And yeah, that's a great point.
And it doesn't take much, does it? You're going to have to get in there and handle a couple of things, but generally speaking, some of the areas that are going to improve the value of the practice the most aren't necessarily things that are so overwhelming to fix that they take years and years and years. I think you can probably turn some of these things around pretty quickly. Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the first owners I worked with, when I started consulting, had a failed transaction. Ownership team was burnt out, and they sold a year later for significantly higher value. And we've done that with a few owners. It's not a huge investment. It's usually investment of time and energy in getting the team, back on track, leadership development, some small changes. It's really about the team being aligned, knowing their expectations, having the resources to achieve those. It's not big capital investments in most cases. It's really leadership training, engagement, alignment, core business concepts that hopefully, people have focused on throughout the life of their business. But sometimes those get off track or they run in cycles, and you just need some help, getting unstuck.
Yeah. And, to your point, I think at least most of the owners that we've ever dealt with, no one got into this business to oh gosh, I'm going to sell my practice for $15-20 million. I don't think anybody had. Maybe they did. Some of them probably did, but most of them were, practitioners at heart. And, I think the quicker that you can also try to think like an owner, entrepreneur, investor, and maybe not think so much like just a practitioner, that's going to have a tremendous impact on your planning, on how you build your business. And, because you're a PT, right?
Yeah, PT that had no intention of ending up, in the line of work that I do. Quickly went from treating PT into management, into minority partner, and we were in a very rapidly growing practice. I joined it in 2000. We had 3 clinics. Our goal was build it, but we didn't really have a target of what that was going to be. And we built it to about 30 clinics by 2015.
Wow.
Yeah. And you mentioned this earlier, a lot of owners hit that stage where, every year they're challenging themselves to, do something they haven't done before, which is great. And that is typically inspiring and engaging. But sometimes, reaching out for help or getting help along the way just makes a lot of sense. And we did that in our practice. I think some of the best investments we made were, bringing in various people to help with the business. And one of the things we always did that I encourage owners to do is, always invest in building their value. And if you've got strong leadership, if you've got an engaged team, if you invest in figuring out what works in marketing, what works in recruiting, that's going to build a more valuable business over time.